Alright guys, how are we doing today? Steve Mingle, co-founder of Web Design. Here's another video as I'm very intrigued on the whole AI topic and how companies in our industry are moving with people and employees. So in this video, why don't we take another look at how companies are starting to realize that the AI tech bubble is kind of how they're quietly trying to rehire somebody. So let's get into it. Final Web Design, this is Steve. So let's get into this and let's see what it's about.
By 2030, 90% of developers would be replaced by AI.
90% of developers would be replaced by AI. If you've been working in the AI field the last couple months, you obviously realize that although the industry has changed a little bit, by no means has it wiped out 90% of the workload or 90% of the developers needed. If anything, I think it's only going to be increasing the developers over the years.
Those were the experts' estimates a few years ago. But today, the reality is very different.
Gartner just said that 50% of companies who laid off workers because of AI will rehire for the exact same roles by 2027.
So far,
well, there you go. And I'm already seeing it too, whether people thought they were going to build websites, they were going to automate their social medias, their email marketings, their client responses. Yes, some of that stuff can happen and some of that can be implemented with AI and the help of businesses like ours. However, it's definitely not replacing 90% of your tech employees because all that stuff is handled by tech at the end of the day.
in 2026, software engineer hiring is skyrocketing.
It's true that it could wreak havoc, but I think it's much more likely to reshape jobs rather than to erase them altogether.
But this is not necessarily because companies are not using AI, but because AI makes so many mistakes when writing code that expert developers have to correct it 9 out of 10 times.
So not only does AI make a lot of issues when you're writing code that can obviously be cleaned up by humans at the end of the day, but a lot of the features that are used in websites these days aren't even just needed from code. They need the business input, they need the business images, they need the logos, the branding. There's so much elements of a website and a business that aren't just code. In fact, a lot of my life, I've never really been a big coder. Yes, I can do JavaScript, HTML, CSS, Python, anything that needs to be done can be coded and built manually. However, using the AI is just going to be a tool. I don't do a lot of building code with my own hands. I use plugins, extensions, themes, CMS platforms.
Tech giants like Microsoft and Google are outsourcing more and more coding to AI in a productivity push, but some new research shows the tools might not be as helpful as some expect.
This not only affects developers' productivity, but also companies' finances, since the increase in AI-generated junk code raises the workload.
Seasoned engineers were actually 19% slower when using AI tools. Instead of speeding these engineers up, the AI often gave them suggestions that looked helpful, but actually required time-consuming corrections.
That's a huge thing too. A lot of this code being pushed out isn't giving you the exact functionality that's needed, so you actually have to go back there and kind of re-engineer the features that are being provided, which doesn't ultimately help you. Sometimes it's easier to start from scratch and build it as needed than to have something and go back and edit it.
All of this has made companies reconsider their decision to delegate code creation entirely to AI, because instead of reducing costs as previously thought, it is now increasing them. So, why are companies quietly rehiring software engineers? Over the past few years, the tech industry has repeatedly told us something that seemed inevitable. Companies like Google, Amazon, Meta, and many others have tirelessly repeated one phrase: artificial intelligence is going to replace workers, especially developers. Since early 2024, companies began reducing teams, freezing hiring, and betting on automatic code generation tools that promise to build complete software in seconds. It is estimated that since 2024, companies have laid off around 124,000 software developers.
Amazon, Chegg, Microsoft, Meta, Salesforce, the list continues. Tech companies just are cutting tens of thousands of jobs.
The idea seems simple: fewer developers, more automation, and higher profit margins for companies. However, what started as an apparently unstoppable revolution quickly began to show its limitations.
Yeah, so if you're familiar with the post era in the 2020s when everything went, there were so many jobs out there. And what I think has really happened is not that AI is necessarily taking over all these positions. It's just, as you saw in that graph, like 2023, 2024, 2022, a lot of those jobs needed to get cut because they'd just gotten far too many, thinking that 2020 situation was going to take over the internet and people were going to be remote and, all this software was needed. Well, yeah, it was. But they had to lay off a lot of those people over the years. And I think you're seeing a lot more of that than you're actually seeing AI.
News such as Amazon experiencing 4 critical errors in just 90 days due to AI-assisted code changes made the world realize that AI was not as promising as believed. Reality began to show that writing code is not the same as developing software, and that artificial intelligence, although...
That was the exact sentence. Writing code is not the same as building software. Just remember that. That's how this all should be based on, because building software is not the same as writing code. Code is just an element of it.
Powerful still heavily depends on human supervision. Gradually, companies began to notice that reducing teams was not generating the expected results, but instead creating new problems, more complex and costly to solve.
The study suggests that the return on AI coding, it may be more uneven, less immediate than investors have priced in.
While AI proved to be extremely efficient at generating code quickly, the truth is that it also began producing large volumes of code that required constant correction. Recent studies have shown that AI-generated code contain up to 1.7 times more errors than code written by humans. This has forced companies to spend more time reviewing and fixing these issues. Additionally, massive code generation has caused companies to have up to 38% more code to maintain, increasing system complexity. The problem is that software development is no longer what it used to be, because now the challenge is no longer writing code, but maintaining it, optimizing it, and fixing it. A relevant fact is that 61% of companies that adopted AI tools for programming increased their hiring of senior developers in 2026.
I think that's probably going to be one of the biggest issues, is the entry-level people are going to be a little bit taken back for a few years here, because everything's kind of preparing itself for the future as far as how software and tech's going to work with AI. However, if they do want to hire more senior people who have done this, manually throughout the years and now are implementing AI, I understand where they're coming from. However, yeah, the junior developers are going to have to learn how to build code, not just a traditional way, but with AI, and then how to get into a business and utilize that. And that's a big learning curve that I'm sure a lot of the schools and stuff just aren't prepared for, as this is all evolving so quick.
Mainly to review AI-generated code.
Now some of those mid-level Google engineers are shaking free. This is your dream. So you just need to hold your hand up in this job environment if you're a former Google engineer and you're going to get offers.
Another major problem is that artificial intelligence generates code without understanding business context. According to Gartner, more than 50% of errors in AI-generated code are related to a lack of business context understanding, not syntax or programming errors. AI can write functions, structures, and algorithms based on learned patterns, but it does not understand business objectives, technical constraints, or strategic decisions. This means that many times the generated code works in isolation, but fails when integrated into real systems. This has been notable, as a study by IBM found that 4 out of 10 development teams reported compatibility issues when integrating AI-generated code into existing
Exactly, and that's something I've experienced too, is a lot of this code and then trying to integrate it with platforms like the WordPress or Shopify's or whatever people already built into their ecosystems. I mean, yes, there are areas that can help with the AI, but there's still a lot of manual stuff that has to be done that AI is just not able to do without the help of a human, that I've experienced in the last 3 months. I mean, I almost wish I could automate more of this workload with an AI type situation, but I'm finding myself that, yeah, it's helping. It helps, create content. It helps to create graphics and to get code blocks and to reply to emails and stuff. But it's not taking over the workload of the things when a client asks me to fix a form or do this or that. Like, I still have to go in there and do those things manually, because that's how the whole systems have been set up and what they want to use.
Infrastructures. As a result, human developers must intervene to adapt that code, fix errors, and optimize performance, increasing the need for experienced developers.
The tools, they're certainly being used. They're here. The payoff may just be more uneven than the hype suggests, and perhaps it plateaus at a certain point.
But perhaps the biggest problem with AI is that, unlike a human developer, AI cannot correct itself. When a developer makes a mistake, they can realize it in time. But when AI makes a mistake, it does not detect it unless you point it out. Researchers at Princeton University discovered that AI models failed to self-correct in more than 60% of cases, even when asked to review their own code. This has led companies like Google, Amazon, and Meta to begin reconsidering their initial strategy.
Companies are trying these tools, they're not always working, and so they're asking eventually, where's the value?
And experienced developers are aware of AI's limitations. Recent studies have indicated that up to 96% of developers do not fully trust AI-generated code. This has turned code supervision into one of their central tasks, leaving aside important tasks such as innovation. As a consequence, the real productivity of the few remaining developers began to decline. A GitHub study found that 49% of teams reported a decrease in real productivity, and ultimately, this translates into higher costs for companies.
Big tech now pouring more capital than ever into AI. Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon expected to spend a combined $600 billion in CapEx. That's this year alone.
All these limitations of AI-generated code have created a bottleneck in development teams. As a result, companies have begun rehiring employees who were previously laid off. It is estimated that up to 4 out of 10 new hires are software developers who are former employees of companies that have laid them off after replacing them with AI. This phenomenon, known as boomerang hiring, is rapidly growing in the tech sector, as these professionals can integrate faster, understand internal systems, and detect complex errors that AI fails to identify.
I want you back. It's a catchy tune. And it's also an increasingly popular hiring trend. It's what's called boomerang hire. 35% of new hires being made up of past employees.
While it is true that AI is replacing some software developer roles, these are mostly junior.
Yeah, so I mean, although it is true that it is replacing some software development roles, and even like I can tell with some clients that have maybe been like, oh no, we're gonna just hold off for a little bit, like they want to go try AI and build a site or, you know, get in, see what's exactly about to happen. You're starting to find now that a month or two later, they're in the same position and they're like, well, this, you know, doesn't just magically appear. And unfortunately, there's a huge learning curve. You got servers, you got backends, you got databases. You know, there's a lot to configure, set up to make these systems run.
This has caused many companies to reduce junior hiring and increase demand for experienced developers. More than 54% of companies have indicated they plan to hire more senior developers while reducing junior positions, reflecting a structural shift in the tech industry.
Now, this latest suggests that while it can help that group level up, it may actually be increasing reliance on senior talent because someone still needs to debug, refine, and ship the final product.
The tech industry is beginning to recognize that artificial intelligence does not replace developers on its own. And this is reflected in recent hiring trends. For example, around 20% of the software engineers hired by Google in 2025 were former employees who were rehired. But this return is happening quietly, without major announcements, yet with a significant impact on the labor market. The developers being rehired are those with experience, capable of supervising artificial intelligence.
So I think that's what we're seeing. It's going to be a little bit hard out there for the junior developers and like people getting in the field, but you got to understand everybody's got to start somewhere. It wasn't necessarily easy back when the whole Web 2.0 came out and, you know, I entered the whole field, so.
And improving generated code. This demonstrates that artificial intelligence is not at the level of an experienced developer. Sometimes it is simply used as an excuse to boost stock valuations and lay off workers.
I think that's a really good way that they said that at the end. Is sometimes it's used to raise stock evaluations and to lay off workers, and that's about what I'm seeing it right now. I am not seeing it take over my workload. I'm not seeing it take over my clients. I'm not seeing it, you know, build websites out of magic that are branded business, SEO friendly, that rank on Google, that get promoted daily. with social media, blogs, content, videos, you name it. Yes, AI has been amazing. I've spent a lot of fun the last few months to learn and to kind of get really involved with and see where it's going, because we were all kind of nervous. But as I've gotten here now, at the end of April, I'm starting to realize that obviously AI is a very powerful tool. It can do some really cool things, but it's by no means taking out the tech industry, coders, or anything in this field. So with that, guys, keep learning. If you have any videos, leave a comment, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.